This is FD Talks, a brand new podcast series by Funeral Directors Life, where we explore ideas, insights, and solutions for serving families in a rapidly changing marketplace. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to our FD Talks podcast. Today, we're in the studio talking with FDL's Digital Marketing Supervisor, Haley Laurence, about how funeral homes can use Google Ads to grow their online presence. So, Haley, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
And before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about your role here at Funeral Directors Life?
Sure, yeah. So I started the company in 2018. Before that, my background was in journalism, and then got the job here just doing Facebook. And so I started out doing Facebook boosts and generating leads for funeral homes. And after generating tons of leads through Facebook lead ads, me and my team kind of transitioned to doing more Google ads. So I learned about how to do that. Got Google Ads certified, used a lot of YouTube and internet searches to learn how to do that. And from there, I helped funeral homes all over the country with their Google Ads and have just grown the program from there.
So I hear that a lot, Google Ads, and It's a buzzword in conversations. Funeral directors ask me about that all the time. Can you just kind of set the stage for that? Tell me what Google Ads are.
Sure. So sometimes it's called PPC, which means pay-per-click. And basically what it means is Google is a search engine, right? So whenever people search for certain keywords, there's going to be different websites that show up. Well, what Google came up with this idea to have people actually pay to show up near the top, because they knew that most people are only going to look at the top anyway. So if I'm going to be searching for women's clothes, I'm going to look for the top result and probably click on that result, whatever it is. And so Google decided, well, what if people could actually pay money to show up at the top for certain keywords? And so for funeral homes, that's actually comes in handy because people are searching for their services. So they're searching for funeral home near me, cremation near me, funerals nearby, anything like that. And so whenever they're searching for that, a lot of times there's a lot of competition. And depending on your area and how many funeral homes are there can be a lot of other funeral homes that are showing up at the top. But if you can actually pay to show up at the top first and be the first one that family sees, and then they click on you, they may choose you just from that split second interaction. They may decide to choose your funeral home and stay with you rather than switching to a different funeral home. So, and it's also a really good way to reach people who have never heard of that funeral home. So a lot of times we have families from all over the country, and if I was to go and plan a funeral for my grandma, I would have to go to another state. And so I'd be Google searching, what are the funeral homes around here? And so I wouldn't know where to turn, and I'd be just depending on Google to show me that top result, and I'd probably just click on that and go with that.
But everybody can't be on the top, can they?
No. So it's a competition. So it's kind of a competition. It's called bidding. So it's an auction. So basically what happens is whoever's doing Google Ads will say, I want certain keywords and I'm willing to pay a certain amount to show up for that keyword. And then Google takes into consideration several other factors. So it takes into consideration the website, the way the website's structured. It also looks at how many Google reviews the business has and how relevant it is. So, for example, if I was to be searching again for women's clothes, it's going to look for what's more relevant to me, given my demographic, given what I'm most interested in, maybe the fact that I'm in Texas, so I'm going to start seeing women's clothes in Texas that's more relevant to me as a mom. So Google's going to try and show me exactly what's relevant to me. And so with the Google Ads, you can actually pay to show up and not only take into account all of those relevancy factors like your website, Google reviews, and pay money. And that's Google takes both those things into account in the auction and says, okay, whoever pays the most and has the most relevant website gets the top spot. And so with our funeral homes, we're trying to help them obviously get to the top spot. And so it's a competition. So it is a matter of money, but it's also a matter of how relevant that funeral home is. And you're not going to be on the top 100% of the time, but our goal would be to obviously get you close to 100% of the time at the top.
Would you say, this may be an unfair question to ask, but would you say that because you are in the funeral profession doing this, that your chances of getting them at the top is a little better than someone who maybe is only in the Google ad business?
Yeah, that's true. So a lot of times there's companies that do pay-per-click or Google ads that are just doing it for all sorts of businesses. And what they do is they come in, and a lot of times they'll just think, oh, funeral home, flowers, caskets, what are some keywords like that? But really, if someone's coming into town to plan their aunt or their grandmother's funeral, they would probably not be searching for caskets, right? They would probably be searching for funeral home near me. And so a lot of times these other companies that aren't in the funeral profession, they get confused and they start bidding on words like flowers, when really what you need to be bidding on is something called transactional keywords, which is like funeral home near me. And so for us being in the funeral profession, we're able to go to these funeral homes and say, let's use the right keywords to reach the right audience. And so a lot of times we can help do that. And some of these pay-per-click companies that'll come in, they also oftentimes will present reports that are kind of, altered a little bit, or they'll kind of make it seem like, oh, you got 5,000 clicks. That's great. But were those clicks for the right keywords? Were those clicks in the right area? Did they actually take any action on your website afterwards? And so there's a lot of things that those companies don't necessarily look at. So they'll bring you a report and say, hey, we're doing great. But it may not actually be the results that you want. And you may be spending a lot of money, but you don't know exactly what you're getting for that money.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about what the opposite of that is. What does success look like?
Oh,
or
yeah.
Maybe you, without maybe naming names, but talk to me a little bit about what it looks like to be successful with Google Ads.
Yeah, for sure. So we did have a funeral home that they decided to open up a new cremation brand. So they wanted to kind of change their brand a little bit and still stick with their tried and true funeral home brand for those traditional people, but they wanted to expand and create a cremation brand that was a little bit more low cost, a little bit more just kind of new and fresh in their community. So when they start out with a new website, guess what? Google doesn't necessarily like a new website because it may not be relevant yet, doesn't have very much traffic. And so Google was going to put them down at the bottom of the list. But we came in and we did some Google ads and we kind of helped them structure their website in such a way that they started to show up at the top. And at the beginning, Google Ads was their only source of traffic and their number one source of traffic because they didn't have anyone else. And there were no links out there. It was a brand new website. So building it from the ground up, putting a little bit of money into Google Ads went a long way to building up that brand to where now they're getting hundreds and thousands of visitors a month because they are reaching the right people that are actually interested in that cremation brand and still utilizing some of the well-known aspects of their old brand. So that's one example. Another example would be a funeral home that they actually not only did Google search ads, but they expanded into Google display ads, which are those banner images you'll see if you're looking at like a news website or something like that. You'll see a banner image that's kind of a flashing ad on the top or on the sides. And this funeral home decided, let's go ahead and spend a little bit of money to show up there as well. And they really promoted some of their veteran services, and they also promoted Medicaid spend down. And so by really focusing in on those specific strategies, they were able to have success because they were showing a visual aspect of their business without being, coming across in a pushy way as a funeral home. It came across as an informative way. And we utilized specific types of websites like news websites where people were already studying or learning educational things. Then they saw an ad for Medicaid spend down or funeral pre-planning, and it hit them at the right moment at the right time. So that's another example of how you can be successful rather than just kind of throwing your ad out there and hoping that a lot of people see it. It's actually being strategic about it.
Mm-hmm. So I guess I had a question here, but you've kind of answered it already, but maybe I can kind of expand it a little bit more. Like, how important is it for a funeral home to consider a Google ad strategy?
Yeah, so I think it pairs well with some of our other Facebook and social media strategies. So your goal really in your city is to get to where everybody knows your name, right? That's the dream, right? As a business, everybody knows my name. And when the time comes that there is a loss or a death in that family, they already know your name and they just type you in and find you. So that would be like the dream, right? So that's where your video strategy, your Facebook, your TV ads, anything that you're doing that's really showcasing your brand. So all these people are hopefully knowing your name. Well, then you have the people who come to town and they don't know your name. And that's where the Google Ads strategy becomes key because there's always going to be those people that don't know where to turn. They're in a time of loss, they're in that grief fog and they're desperate for help. and they're just going to turn to Google because that's the number one place to find information. So if you do not have yourself on Google, you're going to be missing all of those people. Even the people who do know your name, honestly, at a time of loss, they're probably going to be overwhelmed and they're just going to Google search. Most likely they don't have the funeral home's number saved on their phone at this point. They're going to be Google searching. And if you're not on Google, you're missing out on those families.
So what do you think is keeping more and more funeral homes from just completely adopting this strategy?
So a lot of times they think that it's expensive. So they'll think, oh, I have to spend $10,000 a month to show up on Google, so it's going to be too expensive for me. But in reality, you can start small. So oftentimes we'll recommend a much smaller dollar amount for our funeral homes. And the cost per click, that'll range from 50 cents to $2 per click. So just spending that little bit of money can actually go a long way. So that's part of it. Another thing is that they have these, like I said, there's some pay-per-click companies that will come in and do it for them in the past, and they had maybe a bad experience. So a lot of times we'll see that if they have a bad experience, they had someone that was overcharging or didn't present their reports very well, they couldn't really see the value or the return on investment. Another thing that happens is a lot of times a funeral home will Google search for themselves and they won't see themselves come up, and they'll be like, oh no, I'm not at the top, But one thing that they have to remember is that the algorithm's going to be different for each person. So like I said, if I search for women's clothes, that's not going to be the same as like my sister searching for women's clothes. She's going to get different results based on her demographic, her interests than I am. And so a lot of times it's hard for funeral homes to see the big picture unless they have someone coming to them and showing them those reports and showing them all of the different people that are clicking on their ads. But if you just see what you're searching for, you're only going to see your one little corner of the internet. And so by expanding that and looking at the reports and seeing all of the things that are going on, it's a lot easier to see your return on investment. So I think that's another big reason why. And a lot of times they just don't know how to set it up. Google tries to make it easy, but at the same time, it can get very complicated with the auction and the bidding and the keywords. And so it can be very overwhelming for a funeral home to try and do that themselves.
So speaking of that return on investment you were talking about, how is that something that a funeral home can quantify?
Yeah. So whenever they decide how much they want to spend, if they just spend that money without adding any tracking to it, it's kind of hard to tell what you're getting. You might be getting clicks, but what is a click? What is the value of a click? And so for us in digital marketing, we want to say, okay, what's that value in that click? So for example, a phone call, that would be a valuable click, right? As a funeral home, if someone picks up the phone and they call you and then you plan and you set that arrangement appointment, that is valuable, and only your funeral home can tell how valuable that truly is. It's going to be different for each funeral home. So that would be, if we can show you the exact amount of calls that your $300 gave you for that month, that's going to tell you your return on investment. If you also have some action items on your website, like a contact form, again, only you as a funeral home know how valuable that is. If someone fills out your contact form or your pre-need form, that could be a pre-need contract of however many $1,000, that's valuable to your funeral home. So if you can take your Google Ads and tie it to your website and your phone calls, then you have your answer right there, because you can see how much you spent and then how many calls and how many website form completions there were. And that would tell you how valuable your investment is. For funeral homes that do have an online planning tool, that even enhances the amount of return on investment they can see. So maybe they have their website, maybe they have their phone calls, but if you add an online pre-planning tool, you can actually see that dollar amount.
Good. So you were talking a little bit earlier before about Google reviews, and I know that's an important part of everybody wants a great Google review. What is your team, or what do you recommend funeral homes do in order to get that review and have good reviews?
Yeah, so Google reviews are huge. Google's actually shifted its algorithm to really focus on that. And the reason why is if you're buying a product or you are, picking a restaurant, you go out of town, you're looking for the best taco place, you are depending on those Google reviews. Those are life-changing, because that's going to tell you the best taco place or the best, product that you're going to buy. If I'm going to spend money on something, I want to know that there are so many hundred other people who wrote a good review about it. So Google decided, hey, that's going to mean the more Google reviews, the more good reviews, that means that business is better. So that business gets to be at the top. So the more Google reviews you have, the more likely you are to show up at the top, both on the map search, but also on the just website search on Google. And so that's a huge way to boost your reputation. But of course, you have to get those reviews. And so part of what we do is sometimes people will use a widget to put reviews on their website and then have a little button for people to click and go to their Google page. And one thing to kind of keep in mind for funeral homes, a lot of times they have a lot of locations. Each location gets its own reviews. So that can be kind of hard sometimes, because if you have 5 chapels, maybe you have one chapel that's only got 1 review, and then you have another chapel that has, 500 reviews. And so it can be hard to really build up all of those different chapels. And the way we do it is we actually have an aftercare system at Funeral Directors Life that has text messages that go out and invite people to write a review. And what's really important is kind of having that conversation with the family and then sending those text messages after the service. You don't want to ask everyone in your community for a review. You just want to ask the families that you served. And the best thing you can do is do a good job. If you're serving people well, and again, I go back to the taco place example just because it's something we're all familiar with. If we know there's a good taco place that serves well and does a good job, they're going to get more reviews. And so as a funeral service, what you're doing is so much more valuable than tacos. You're helping people with a huge life event. And so if you can do that really well and then, kindly and respectfully ask for a review through a text message or even through verbal, then those people turn around and write good reviews. Then you also reply to the reviews, which Google also considers as part of its algorithm, is how quickly you reply. So if you're replying like 5 months later, that's actually going to ding you on your Google score. But if you can reply within that same day, reply to those reviews, and we actually have some services around that as well to help funeral homes who maybe don't have time to sit there and reply to reviews, and even reply to the negative reviews. And that shows people that you are engaged in your community. So not only are you getting lots of reviews, but you're engaging back with everyone who writes those reviews. So whether it's a negative review or positive review, it can kind of be hard sometimes to figure out what to say. And that's why we actually have a guide for that. So it's a blog post on our website that you can go to and read all about some of the do's and don'ts. And it even has some ideas for where to start when you're writing those responses. So we just want to make it easy for people.
That's great. What is at risk for funeral businesses if they decide that they're going to take more of a passive approach to Google?
Yeah. So if they don't really engage with their Google, for one thing, this is kind of frustrating for funeral homes, is Google will sometimes change their address or put in the wrong phone number just on its own because, they have their Google satellites and everything, and they're always keeping it updated, but sometimes it's actually wrong. So if you don't actually address and claim your Google business, that can hurt you. If you don't work on your reviews, that can hurt your score. Like I said, you'll show up lower and lower on the search. And then if you don't do Google Ads, which is kind of the main thing we've been talking about today, like I said, your competitors can start showing up at the top, which means you might miss out on some families. So you're going to show up in a search, but where you show up in that search is going to be dependent on your strategy. And if you're strategic with your website, with your Google Ads, and with your complete marketing strategy, then you are going to show up at the top, and you're going to have that reputation to where people want to click on you and they want to go to your website and actually engage with your business. And if you don't do that, then you're not going to have engaged families. People are going to move out of town, and they're going to come to town, and they're just going to pick whichever one shows up at the top. And if it's not you, they're probably going to pick somebody else, and that's going to be hard for your business. It may not be visible right now. And I know whenever times get hard, people often do cut their marketing budget. But later on, those effects can be seen down the road. As if you do start to lose those families, you'll see the negative impact, maybe not today, but in the next few months or the next few years, if you don't continue to have a strong, complete marketing strategy.
So Haley, do you have any closing thoughts or things you'd like to share before we wrap up today?
Yeah, so I think that just overall from everything we've talked about today, I think it's really clear that funeral homes do need to have a strategy, and they can't just necessarily put all their eggs in one basket. So if they've always done mailed pieces really well, but they're missing out on their digital side. If they've always done Facebook really well, but they're missing out on Google. And so if they're missing out on any of these key areas, there's going to be families that they might miss. And so having a complete strategy is really good. Having a partner that you can work with that actually knows how to put those pieces together is so critical, and being able to actually reach the right audience. Because if you're not reaching the right audience, then you're kind of wasting your money. And so what we want for funeral homes is for them to spend their money in the right place, reach the right people, and see that return on investment, so that they, whenever, times get hard, if they feel like they need to cut the budget, then, marketing should be hopefully not something that they cut, because they'll see the value in it.
Well, as we wrap up, if our listeners are interested in learning more about how to take a more proactive approach to Google, what's a good next step for them?
Yeah, so they can reach out to us. They can reach out to me or to anyone on our team. We have a really great team that can walk them through the why, like we did on this podcast, but also the how, and actually how we can do that in a strategy in a way that is very easy for our services, and also to start seeing those reports. So if you were to reach out and take those next steps and start with our Google Ads service, you'd be able to see those reports within the next month on your service. And like I said, see those results. So get started and then see results. It's as easy as that.
Awesome, Haley. Thanks so much for being here today. Thank you all for watching. And as always, if you have any questions or comments or ideas for future episodes, you can always reach out to me at fdtalks@funeraldirectorslife.com. Thanks for watching. If you would like to reach out to us about this episode or this series, please visit us online at funeraldirectorslife.com/FD Talks. There you can find information about this episode and submit any comments, suggestions, or feedback about our series. And we also welcome your ideas for future episodes. Join us next time on FD Talks as we explore ideas, insights, and solutions for serving families in a rapidly changing marketplace.